It is great to be here at the 27th Conference of Montreal. My name is Sasha Vakulina. I'm Euronews business editor. And for the next session, for this keynote interview, I'm joined by Dr. Markus Kreber, CEO of RWE. Dr. Kreber, thanks for being here.
It's a pleasure. Hello, Sasha.
During this session, we're going to be talking about something very important, goes very much in line with the theme of the conference, which is, of course, towards a fairer and greener economy. We're going to focus on charting the European energy future. And here, the centerpiece, of course, would be the ambitious European Green Deal that pledges to reduce emissions by at least 55% by 2030. Now, this target is already more ambitious than the one the European Commission announced earlier a little bit. Let me ask you this. Is it doable at the current pace of changes, or do we need to do it even faster and to go even more ambitious? What's your take on that?
Sasha, I really welcome the Green Deal and the implementation package, which is called Fit for 55, which is a 55% reduction target. It's a real challenge, but it's also an opportunity for the European industries. What I like most about it, that we have now so ambitious targets that the discussion about, further ambitious targets is over, and everybody really shifts the focus on implementation and what is needed now, and that is act. You have companies like us who are willing to invest. All investments in renewables are currently highly attractive across Europe. We also have the capital available, so the discussion really starts focusing now on where are the bottlenecks. And when I talk here about Europe, the bottlenecks are that we don't have enough space available. We need more seabed leases. We need more land to employ more renewable capital. But also, we need faster planning and permitting processes. Sometimes it takes 5 to 7 years to build something onshore, which, for example, in North America takes only 1 to 2 years. And I think that is where the discussion now focuses, what really needs to be implemented to achieve these very ambitious targets. And that is what needed.
And without changing the regulations and helping that out, do you think that 55% by 2030 is too ambitious, or is it still doable?
It is doable, but we need to change gears now. We need to switch gears now. And I think that is also very obvious in every discussion we have with the European Commission, but also with the national governments. Everybody understands that we cannot continue as we have done it in the last years, because that pace is not fast enough to achieve the targets.
Well, let me ask you this as well. When it comes to achieving those ambitious targets, of course, we are now in a very unprecedented situation, right? A year and a half of the global pandemic. We're slowly, hopefully, surely getting out of this, and the economy is rebounding and recovering. How has this situation changed those plans? Because on the one hand, of course, there are calls to accelerate this transition, accelerating this pace, going greener because of that as well. But also we do understand that with the economy has struggled generally, global and European. What's your take on that?
Let's go back maybe 1.5 years when the pandemic started. And everybody had doubts whether that would change the political priorities, and maybe climate change is less important than it has been before. But I think, at least here for Europe and also globally, the obvious is true. I think everybody now wants to use also the money which will be channeled via governments into the economy for the right purposes. So I feel more a bigger push for renewable and energy transition. And the industries and the supply chain has now accommodated to the new COVID situation. I think that is not hindering us anymore.
Well, and that happened rather fast.
Yes, I agree.
Is the EU transition towards net zero in 2050 reshaping global energy trade with partners, and how so?
Yes, I think global energy trade will shift with the new supply and demand economics. And when you think about Europe, what is clear, Europe is currently depending on energy import. we are importing a lot of fossil energy. I mean, coal, oil, gas. And now with the need to have more and more green energy being available also in Europe, we probably shift that over time, because what is already clear today is that Europe will never be in a position to produce all the green electricity which is needed for the full energy transition. Maybe we can replace our conventional electricity by green, but when you then start thinking about the derivatives like hydrogen, ammonia, methanol, and so on, we will not have enough green electricity in Europe to also produce that here locally in Europe. So we will also in future depend on imports. But of course, we will import green energy products. And that is why global coordination is needed. And many European countries, also the European Union, has already established energy partnerships like with the Middle East, North Africa, and Australia.
Is there a chance, and if so, how much time would that take to actually rebalance that situation and be sort of, rather self-sufficient for Europe there?
I think it will decades. We will even start producing these energy derivatives, as I said, ammonia, hydrogen, and so on here in Europe. But just to synchronize the investment cycles of the industry, the European industry cannot simply wait until we import. So you're going to see an interim phase where we produce locally, but that will over time be replaced by imports.
Well, yeah, and then the next question would be, when will the European Union be ready to export clean energy then?
So I don't think that we will ever be in a position to export green energy products. What, of course, we can export is the know-how and technology for renewable energy, but also hydrogen. And I think because Europe is a bit ahead of the curve, what we also can export is the know-how, what I would call systematic know-how, because we know what will high rates of intermittent wind and solar production do to the entire electricity system. And how can we ensure security supply also with these technologies? And I think that is a know-how we can also export to other nations.
Could you give us a little bit of a sneak peek into some of the examples within RWE when it comes to those ideas and how it is?
I mean, what we currently think through is how can we ensure security of supply here in Germany in a fully green energy world? You probably know that we need to replace significant nuclear and coal capacity. And of course, we as a company are not willing to invest, for example, in natural gas power generation if it's not clear how that will become green, because then I'd replace the discussion I currently have on coal in 10 years' time by the same discussion in gas. Nobody is willing to invest unless we have a clear plan how we decarbonize this new firm capacity which is needed.
Yeah, of course, and nuclear is another interesting point in the debate when it comes to greener energy. And but RWE itself is aiming at the net zero in a record time for 2040. Is there a role for RWE and private sector to drive the transition ahead of policies? Because this is, again, of course, there is need for RWE and for companies to have policies that help, obviously, and with incentives and so on. But let's go into how your company is dealing with that as well, because of your target and your deadline of 2040.
Yeah. So 2 years ago, we have decided to go for this very ambitious target to become carbon neutral by 2040, which is even faster than the European target or the German target and other companies' targets. And we have decided to achieve that by transforming the company and investing heavily in renewable technology, and with that allowing us to phase out our fossil business. And I think we want to do that under the umbrella of one company and not splitting the company in two pieces. What is, of course, needed, and here comes the hand-in-hand work of companies and politicians, we need the right framework to achieve that. And when the politicians set the right framework, we as company can act and invest within this framework. But what I also see is that industries, companies are pushing politicians more and more to get the right framework, because it's obvious that green energy supply will be very relevant to keep our industries competitive. So industries will only settle where they are sure that they will get access to competitive green energy.
Well, do you think this framework is clear enough nowadays, as it stands at 2021, well, we still have not that much time left before 2040. Is this the framework that you want to see, or there are things to improve? And if there are things to change or improve, what are those? Well, what else would you want to see when it comes to RE?
I think we operate in different markets, right? So I see the difference in the different markets, and I see some markets which are well ahead because they have a consistent framework. And I would name the UK as one example for the power generation side, a clear carbon pricing system, but also a capacity mechanism to ensure security of supply. And today we are discussing how to incentivize the ramp up of the hydrogen economy and the decarbonization of the gas sector, including CCS. So very comprehensive and a hand-in-hand framework. When it comes to Germany, we have carbon pricing, yes, but we have not solved the issue how to incentivize investment in security of supply. And it's also not yet clear how the hydrogen backbone will look like over time. So I think we need to encourage politicians to go faster with implementing the frameworks. I think the Green Deal and the Fit for 55 package addresses the right topics, but of course in the European Union it all depends on implementation on national level. And here we have maybe 1 to 2 years to get it done. Otherwise we risk not achieving the target.
Yeah, and I'm going to bring here your quote just recently when you called for a new federal government to accelerate the pace of the shift to renewable energy by increasing targets, expanding the grid, and cutting the approval procedures for wind energy plants, for example. So these are some of those ideas that you want to see when it comes to Germany. Now, of course, as you said, in the European Union, we also have the situation of national levels and the European levels. And whilst there is this big push and big ambitious Green Deal on the European level, then it still has to go on national, which could take more time, the time that you probably want to speed up that pace and others in the business want to.
Yes, I agree. If you look at the policy architecture in Europe, you have the European targets. The only real instrument on European level is the EU ETS, so the carbon pricing. All others are just, agreed measures which then need to be implemented on national level. And that can look totally different in the different countries, which is not a problem in itself because national markets are different and political decisions are different. You already referred to the situation on nuclear, which is maybe unique for Germany, right? So I have no problems with the architecture, but we need to ensure that national governments also implement as fast as possible.
Well, the situation in nuclear is really particular and very specific when it comes both to the European, so to say, landscape and the situation, and when it comes to Germany. RV rejected recently the idea of letting nuclear power plants stay open for longer due to the fact that they produce less carbon dioxide. This is, of course, the debate that has been happening for years, if not decades, when it comes to nuclear and the greener push. There is still not enough clarity on the European level on that one as well, because of the Green Deal and the wording there, of course, and then the European Climate Bank involved. What would you want to see when it comes to the aspect of nuclear? What kind of clarity you would want to see there?
I think we as a company, we have all clarity we need because, we run our nuclear plants here in Germany. And it's clear that we will decommission them latest by the end of next year. That decision has been taken, and my expectation is that will not reopen again. It's also too late. I think even if somebody really wants it, we are not able and we are not willing to extend the lifetime here. On European level, I think we have a scattered landscape across Europe with different views on nuclear. I think the European Union has decided to leave that to the national level. Of course, we also operate in other countries outside Germany, and potential investments in nuclear are a potential question. But I think if you would design an energy system greenfield, probably nuclear will not play a relevant role because the combination of wind, solar, and wind, solar-based hydrogen as backup, then burned in hydrogen units, is still cheaper than nuclear if you also count all the cost for nuclear waste storage and so on. And I think we all see the examples of new builds of nuclear, like the one in Georgia, in the US, in Finland, in France, and so on. It's all delayed by almost decades, and it's all running out of the cost budget. So I think it's simply a technology which is currently too expensive.
Yeah, and sort of in this case, the technology and the cost, they speak for themselves, right? Let me ask you a little bit on what's your view on the role of the financial markets for the global decarbonization? Is it more likely that decarbonization will be successful and driven by them rather than politics? That's another aspect in this conversation, isn't it?
Yeah. Sasha, I think that all needs to work hand in hand, politics, financial markets, and companies. But
well, look, it does have to work hand in hand, but this is like in a sort of a perfect and ideally balanced situation. How much still could the financial markets do for that?
I think the financial market plays a very important role. In every discussion we are having with our investors and banks, the topic of sustainability and transforming the company into a green one is a topic, is one of the top priority topics. I think the important point for me is that we get the definition and the approach to sustainable investments and ESG investing right. You can, on the one hand side, support the transformation of companies, but there's also a risk if you use too simplified metrics that you just force companies to sell their polluting assets. And I think that is not a solution, because that will be maybe even problematic from a social standpoint. Who's going to buy it? Is it transparent? What is his intention to buy it? And so on. So I think we should do everything which is possible to accelerate the transformation, but in a decent governance framework, and also dealing with the social consequences in an acceptable manner. And that's why I say I think we should run these transformation in publicly listed companies. And there, of course, we need the right approach from the financial market to be able to finish that task.
So when it comes to the financial market, there's still not, well, there should be more clarity there as well.
I think not clarity, but you have different camps, as I said. I mean, you have very simplified approaches to sustainability. And there somebody says, if you own more than X gigawatt of coal capacity, you are out, you are uninvestable. That, of course, forces companies to split, which I think is not a solution to transformation. Or you have more intelligent ways where investors engage in the discussion with us and ask us the right question, and I accept it, is, can you even transform faster? We are supporting your transformation, but we ask you to go as fast as possible. And that, for me, is the right way to approach sustainable investment.
So it's the customized rather approach when it comes to this way. But also with the going on faster and moving faster here, as you've just said, what are the risks for companies like RV?
I actually don't see any huge risk. I mean, our business is to supply green energy. And I think that will be a decade-long growth market. I think the right question for a company like us is, where do we place our bets? Where do we really add value? I mean, in terms of technology, global technology, but also local markets, and of course, serving our energy-intensive customers. But so far, I think, there are plenty of opportunities, growing markets. The company is ready to deliver. So I think we as a company have a bright future.
How important is the decarbonization of the industry when it comes to reaching the bigger climate goals? Because, of course, for the company like RV and others in the industry, they are quite often questioned about their pace and their moves towards achieving climate goals.
I think for the utilities, so the power generators, the path to decarbonization is more or less set with wind, solar, and then hydrogen. For the industries, especially the heavy industries where electrification is a problem, like steel, cement, and others, there is still the route to be defined. And of course, we need their contribution. We will never achieve the targets. We can never fully decarbonize without the industry contributing. But here, where all the jobs are affected, I think the critical aspect is, can we decarbonize our industries and still maintain our competitiveness? Because that, in the end, also determines whether we keep our jobs. And here, if we lose the job, in nations, then of course we also risk losing the public support from the people for the energy transition. And I think that's why it's so important that we decarbonize the industries, but in a way that they maintain their competitiveness. And of course, I mean, I come back to that theme, but for me, the availability of renewable green energy at competitive prices is the most relevant factor for the decarbonization of our industries.
And what would be for you, for RV, what would be give me something like top 3 concerns that you have for the nearest, for your nearest future, let's say 3 to 5 years. We're not even reaching the 2040 deadline yet. And, you know, the good things and the bad things, the obstacles and the complications that you might be seeing and focusing on, and then also the goals for you and the targets that to achieve on this way.
Yeah, let me, Sasha, let me address 3 themes. I mean, one is, are we able to finish the transformation of a fossil company into a fully green under the umbrella of one company? I mean, the entire topics around sustainable investing. I think that is something where the jury is still out, and I really hope that that goes the right direction. The other aspect is, can we really convince the policy setters to implement the new frameworks we need to accelerate renewable build-out fast enough? Because otherwise we risk not achieving the targets. And then the third one is on the industrial side. I mean, our support to decarbonize our industrial customers. I mean, probably know that we have set up some joint project proposals to decarbonize the chemical industry in Germany faster than the existing targets. But also we are asking to approach the decarbonization of the industries very pragmatically. I give you a very clear example. If there is a steel mill somewhere in Europe and they want to invest into a new CO2-free technology, which is DRI, so based on hydrogen, using hydrogen to produce steel. Of course, they decide today whether they invest here in Europe or not. At the beginning, there is not enough green hydrogen available. So we need to accept that they first run it maybe on natural gas, later on blue hydrogen based on CCS, and then the moment green hydrogen is available, then they can use it. And we need to have that pragmatism and don't need to approach it too ideological, because then we're not going to end up in the right investment cycles in the core industries here in Europe.
And when you say we need more pragmatism for that, this approach should be coming as well from companies, from politicians as well. That's the approach that you would want to see on the side of politics and regulations, because it's not just politics, it's also about regulations and incentives there.
Yes, but I mean, all discussions we are having are pointing in the right direction. I think there is no lack of understanding. I mean, you know that we now in our home country have upcoming elections, so it needs a new government. And then I think we go the right direction. I mean, actually, we also run a big renewables portfolio in North America, and the discussion there is the same. I mean, what can be done to accelerate renewable build out, and what needs to be done to support the industries there? And also there, it's going the right direction under the administration.
On the global picture, as you said, covering not only Germany, not only Europe when it comes to North America, and globally speaking, with the theme of the conference towards a fairer and greener economy. Now, how to make sure that it's the economy and the growth and the rebound after the pandemic, and this growth, the new one, the sustainable one, is green, is fair, and yet is competitive?
Yes, I think that's the key question. I mean, we all have to admit that we can only fight climate change globally. But that needs, I mean, a fair level playing field and climate diplomacy. Because if we try to game each other and somebody delays his energy transition and by that gaining a competitive advantage, I think we really risk that the global community will not address the most critical problem of these days.
Well, that would mean like a massive dragging back for everybody if that happens, and the total throwback in the pot.
Yes, I agree. But I mean, we had a very similar situation under the Cold War with nuclear weapons. And I think also the global community found an agreement how to deal with that imminent threat.
So it's about finding that thin line and that balance of being fair, green, and competitive at the same time.
Let's be optimistic and let's all work in the right direction. Everybody hand in hand, politicians, financial markets, and companies.
Being optimistic and working harder in one direction. Thank you so much, Dr. Markus Kreber, CEO of RWE. Thank you.
Thank you very much.